Hello, welcome to class today. Today we are going to work on, so last week we made these grayscales, stepped and gradient. And you also put a light gray ground on a surface to paint with for today. And what we're going to work on today is creating form. So form is creating that, well, at least for painting, is creating that illusion of 3D space. So making something look like it has volume and takes up space, weight to it. And the way we're going to do that is through the application of this grayscale that you made. So in an effort to simplify, I have made what I'm calling a gray verse. I actually really, it kind of pained me to, I hate wasting food, and it pained me to paint these squash and an onion in gray. But that's what I did in the service of art for today. The first thing we need to do is to make our grayscale, just like we did last week. Here we are mixing up the grayscale. We're only going to do a 5-step grayscale instead of the 7-step we did last class. And a little bit different this time. You're going to mix a touch of dark into the light and a very smidge of light into the dark. And we're doing this because we want to keep those values on the surface of the canvas. Sometimes bright white looks like it's coming off the canvas, and sometimes the dark looks like a hole in the canvas. The rest of the palette is going to be for you to mix in between these 5 values. This is just the starter set to get you going, but you will be mixing in between the 5 values that we lay out to begin with. So when you're looking at the objects themselves, look for this highlight and the shadow within the object. Look for a cast shadow. If you have something that is flat in value, then you're going to have a very hard time depicting form, because form is all about this, is all about the lights and the darks. So just for an example, I can't help myself. Look, like if we're looking in the direction where the light is coming from, do you see how everything flattens out? Then they just become shapes with values. But as you move around the form, you can see that you start getting that sense of light and that light and dark. And that is what's going to give you the volume that we're looking for in this project. This is about where those objects are going to live on that canvas. So don't let the stems fall off the surface of anywhere, but then also I don't want like little marbles in here. We're going to fill the space. You can take these little brushes that you have and just put them to the side. For this exercise, I want you to use your medium to large size brushes. Big brush, dip it in a little thinner. Now I'm going to go into my paint, and I'm not going to go into the darkest of the paints. I'm going to go into my 1 step up, just because I'm going to try to reserve that darkest of dark for the darkest of darks. Map out the shapes loosely. I'm using thinned out paint, and I'm finding those shapes on the canvas, holding my brush back to the back of the brush. You can see I'm not filling one shape out completely. I'm looking at the spatial relationships between them, and I'm just trying to get a sense right there now of where those shapes are going to live on that canvas. And don't get fixated on one shape. Move around the canvas. Here I am. You're going to want to use your rag to adjust shapes, and this is all being built up right now with loose light washes of color. Just try to map things out. Don't get too thick at this point, and don't get too refined. Here I go back in. I'm trying to redefine where those darks are, always keeping track of where the darks are in there and mapping them out. That you're going to work throughout the picture. Don't get hung up on one little area. You have a color on your brush or a value on your brush. You're going to go throughout throughout the painting and find that value throughout. Here again, you can see I'm starting to add in those medium values. Remember that 3-prong system. It's like you find the darks, you find the midtones, and you find the highlights. And if you can get those 3 things locked into place, those shapes will start to have volume. And don't neglect your background. The values that are in that environment also need to be put in there, and they're going to, of course, influence the values that are in the object themselves. Don't get so fixated on developing the objects that you forget about the environment. You're going to work your way dark to light. Here I am putting in the lighter values. Let that body of paint start coming through. The reason we're using that gray ground is so the lighter values really show up. Everyone makes mistakes. Remember, the beauty of oil paint is that you can dip your rag into the thinner and just reshape things. Don't get so attached to that initial layout that you're afraid to make adjustments when necessary. I forgot to tell you my most favorite trick for kind of really clarifying the values and simplifying them in case you're getting overwhelmed. No one wants to do it, but it's so helpful. I find I'm doing it all the time, unconsciously. Get in the habit of squinting at your work. It will simplify those lights and darks, and it'll show you what's standing out. And then you can squint at your work, and then you squint at your still life. For instance, look at this side of this onion. Now the onion is so bright in value. And when I squint at it, okay, this shadow side is still standing out, but look at how much my shadow side is still standing out. Too much value difference in there. You are going to want to, everything is relational. So because this shadow in here is so dark, this is still reading as bright because it's in relation to that dark shadow. And I'm going to go into my little onion here and just allow this side to get darker so that it will, you can even see it sort of starts losing its form when the value relationships don't make sense. These round forms, there's going to be that core shadow in there, and there is a bit of reflective light, but oh my gosh, look at, for this onion, because these two are kind of relating in this, they are not just having reflected light where the light is bouncing up off the table. Well, that's a little extreme, but there is a little bit of this spot. Oh, I'm not having a hard time getting it. Where this spot is actually kind of bouncing a shadow back and forth, which is pretty interesting. I'm using short brush strokes as I move around the canvas, and when I get a certain value on the brush, I move from place to place throughout the objects. I'm still only using this one big brush. If you use a big brush and you think about the way that you're just touching the surface of that canvas, it's going to keep things light and loose. And then, you're just thinking about the sense of touch as you're putting that brush down, and you're defining the details, but you're still going very lightly and loosely. But remember, paint with a broad stroke. Don't fall prey to minutia. So I haven't gone into my white or light gray yet. I want you to reserve that bright white for only the brightest of highlights. Look at how bright it looks. That onion on there does have this really nice kind of sparkle to it. And this is our painting for the day. Have fun developing forms.